Good? You like it? All right. Okay. Well, we brought you here now because if any of you want to get a movie made in this town, this is how you do it. Anyway, we have an incredible panel once again this year of the heads of the studios and the distributors that are very involved in this year's Oscar race every year and in turning out the movies that you see. So let me introduce them here first of all. And right here to my right is the chairman and CEO of 20th Century Fox, Jim Gianopulos. And to his right, the vice chairman of Paramount Pictures, Rob Moore. The president of the Warner Brothers Pictures Group, Jeff Robinov. Having a very good weekend with the new James Bond film, the co-chairman of Sony Pictures Entertainment, Amy Pascal. The chairman of Universal Pictures, Adam Fogelson. The co-chairman of the Lionsgate Motion Picture Group, Rob Friedman. And the partner, co-chairman, and CEO of DreamWorks Studios, Stacey Snider. And my colleague, once again, Mr. Mike Fleming, and we're going to share the duties here. So I do want to say that Harvey Weinstein, who was listed, could not be here. He has personal family matters at the last minute. And so since he's not here, I feel free to start with this question. How are you Moguls going to make sure that Harvey doesn't make it 3 in a row this year? Okay. Actually, before we go on, Harvey did write a note, of course. So let me just read it because he did send this. I unfortunately couldn't make it to today's Contenders event as I had a family emergency back in New York. Many people have asked me what the secret to an awards campaign is, but the answer is always the same: seeing the movies themselves. It is those behind, in front, and around the camera that are the most important part of this process, and it's my job to make sure as many voters as possible see these films in a theater, and of course, if they can, send in 3 or 4 ballots for my movies. That doesn't hurt. Congratulations to all of today's contenders and my fellow panelists, Amy, Stacey, Jim, Adam, Jeff, and the Robs. And once again, I apologize for not being able to make it. As you know, there's nothing I'd rather be discussing. But the only contenders I won't take on when they put up a fight are my 4 daughters. So that is from Harvey. And
so sweet, I just got a cavity.
So, Mike, let's go on this, though. You know, it is an interesting question about the indies have won the Oscar in the last few years, not just the Weinstein Company, but Slumdog Millionaire and The Hurt Locker, Rob Friedman right there. Is that a fair thing? I mean, the Academy changed the rules, the playing field, to make 10 movies, and I think it was inspired by the fact that The Dark Knight, among movies, didn't get a nomination, and many people felt it should. And, you know, Amy, let me ask you. You're new to the panel this year. Do you think that that's fair that the...
I have to go first.
Look, you have a big James Bond movie out now. It's gotten superlative reviews, the kind of reviews that any so-called Oscar movie might get. But will the Academy take it seriously? Do they take the big blockbuster movie seriously when it comes time for Oscars?
Well, I think the Academy should take big blockbuster movies seriously. I think the Academy should take any movie seriously that is the best version of itself. I think a movie like Argo, that is the best version of itself, and Flight, those are the only 2 movies I've seen so far of the movies, they are the best versions of itself, and those are genre films, just like the James Bond movie is, just like Dark Knight is. I think we all got in this business because of big American movies that we fell in love with, not because of small indie films, and I don't think that we should relegate the power that we have as filmmakers and Academy members to the French, or the English, or the indies. This is what we do. We should own it.
Well, you know, Amy, you mentioned Argo and you mentioned Flight. Now, these are 2 studio films that were made at a price. They're working at the box office, and they're creating Oscar buzz. Do you guys consider these to be anomalies, or maybe is this telling you something about the ability to make challenging adult films, and maybe they should be more of a studio priority?
Well, I think the big change you've seen is the flexibility between agents and producers and talent, that it used to be only the indies got that price break if you were doing material that was really challenging. And now in the world we live in, everybody understands that it doesn't matter if you're Warner Brothers or Paramount or Sony, that if the material is complicated, risky material, then everybody has to pitch in. And fortunately, with us on Flight, Bob Zemeckis and Denzel both were so inspired by the script, they were willing to do it for a different price and hope that the execution of that script would be fantastic and then they would do well in the end. But that is definitely a dynamic that's been changing, where everybody is willing, if they have a great piece of material, to make a different deal so that the economics make sense.
Go ahead, Stacey.
I would add to that while I'm thrilled about the deals and hope that they don't change, what's encouraging also is that there's box office to follow. There really is an adult audience out there, or an audience in general that's interested in serious, provocative movies, and the commercial prospects will follow. But I'm still happy about those deals.
Well, Rob, you mentioned, what you just mentioned really happened. I thought The Fighter was a watershed film because it was put together as a studio film, and then it was kicked to the curb because it was too expensive, and it came back as a movie about half or a third of the price, and you still distributed the film. Is that going to happen now more and more for the studios?
Well, I think the opposite's happening now, which is that people are willing to make that accommodation, where when it was a studio film, the budget, as you said, was 2.5 times what it ended up getting made for. That once it was independently financed, everybody was willing to change the model. Now I think people have also accepted that the studios have the ability to really engage with that material and act like independents and not have it be overly bureaucratic and not dictate the filmmaker. That if Bob Zemeckis comes in and will make a movie at that price point, that you're then willing to give him the creative freedom to make the movie he wants to make. And I think that's a big change that has happened over the last couple of years as well.
And Jim, like you have a movie that's coming out this month, The Life of Pi, which is not a sure thing, obviously, in terms of what we think of as box office blockbusters or safe bets, but it's an extraordinary movie that has the chance to change the way we look at movies. It's so sophisticated.
I think some movies will themselves into being. This is a movie that gestated for 10 years. And several filmmakers tried it, and then Ang Lee came aboard. And then it comes to a point where you say, okay, there's no way to make this movie that isn't expensive. I mean, there's no way to do a CG tiger that dominates most of the film that doesn't cost you an enormous amount of money. And do you really want to walk away from that opportunity? And so some movies just will themselves to be, and you're part of the process that sometimes enables it. And you say, well, let's just go for it and see what happens. And that's one of, unfortunately, as a movie that is very execution dependent, in our view at least, was flawlessly executed. We hope the audience finds it, but we're very proud to have been part of it. Yeah. But we couldn't not make it, is really what it comes down to.
Jeff, what about you? And your slate is a mix of things, but Argo was not an easy thing on paper, I don't think. I don't think you would have looked at it and said, this movie's going to make $100 million, or maybe you did.
We knew it for sure.
So you have a mix of movies. You have The Hobbit coming out. You have all these different kinds of movies. You had The Dark Knight Rises, and you have Argo. So what do you look for when you're putting out a slate? Are you doing just like one movie you know is going to be an Oscar movie, or are you looking just for the best quality movie no matter how it comes?
We really, like everybody else here, respond to the script and the filmmakers and the complete package. Getting back to the original question of where the Academy's at and how they're looking at some of these movies, what I think is missing is, great storytelling is obviously great storytelling, but there's been a change in the way movies are being made, and technology is a big part of it. And I think to overlook a movie because of the technological aspect really doesn't give it the full credit it's due. If you look at a movie for us like Inception, and you think about the layered storytelling and the performances, and then having to also map in the technical challenges, or what happens with you guys on Avatar, isn't really fair. I think it's a new age of filmmaking, a new age of how films are being made, and I do think the Academy needs to really broaden its view of the films that they're analyzing and the complications involved in the execution of that.
Can I just say I would take what happened to him on Avatar?
Me
We
too.
did survive it.
It's okay, but that brings up the question: would you rather have a movie that won an Oscar for Best Picture, but made $14-15 million, or would you rather have an Avatar that was the biggest movie of all time? What do you want on your resume?
Can't have both? You actually can have both. We had it with Avatar, regardless of the outcome of the voting, and really what you want on your resume is enabling great filmmakers and great films. And so whether they win or by accident of fate and voting and the nature of that year, there have been many years where great films or great filmmakers and talent did not get their award that year because it was someone else's turn or it just worked out that way. But that doesn't diminish the quality of the work, regardless of what it does at the box office. And in fact, I think, all through this process, we have to separate process and purpose. The process is arduous, it's complicated, it's expensive, it's long, it's a pain in the ass, but the purpose is to celebrate film art, and great filmmaking, and also to introduce people to those films that might not otherwise have found them. Beast of the Southern Wild is a small little film, could easily be lost, but people started talking about it. Whatever happens at the awards, more people became aware of that, or any of the great films represented up here. People do notice it regardless of whether it wins. So I think that's really the mission, is to make those movies.
One for Jeff, from me. I remember seeing The Dark Knight Rises on IMAX before it opened and saying to my son, I've been doing this forever, and it's so nice to see when a fully realized movie like this just knocks your socks off. And obviously, the tragedy happened in Aurora. And you don't hear that much buzz about this movie when people, I would think, would be looking at it almost like they did in the last Lord of the Rings. What can you do, or what do you intend to do to make sure that movie gets its due?
We really believe in the movie, and obviously really believe in Chris as a filmmaker, and have a very aggressive plan to reintroduce the movie and go after it. It was incredibly well reviewed. Obviously, it's that rare movie that has a combination of great critical reviews and big box office. And again, I think it's one of those things that sort of falls victim to both its genre and the technological aspects of the movie. So, our job is to really get it out there and talk about the storytelling, the execution, the design, all the complications involved in having made such a movie.
Well, now, when I spoke about the tragedy, after that happened, some directors kind of were musing, the violence that they put out and whether it had to be recalibrated and rethought. And since you guys basically decide which movies get made by the major studios, how did you process this tragedy? Did any of you think, did any of you change your attitude that existed before on what violence is depicted on the screen in your films?
We actually changed a scene in Gangster Squad as a direct result of it. It was less an issue of violence and more an issue of sensitivity because of the violence took place actually in a movie theater, where these guys come out from behind a screen and sort of attack an unsuspecting audience, and that just felt irresponsible, frankly. So we changed it not so much for the violence, because it wasn't an incredibly per se violent film and a violent scene, but for sensitivity reasons.
Did any of the other people on this panel kind of look inward and maybe do some soul searching about it?
We modified some of our marketing materials, but we have not changed the way we look at films and the scripts that we want to produce.
I think we've been conscious forever that movies exist in a unique space in popular culture. And I think to the points that have been made here, I think it requires immense sensitivity, but also an acknowledgement that movies are treated differently. I was running marketing back when we did United 93, and when the trailer for United 93 came out in theaters, there was an uproar. In fact, I got a phone call from a reporter at the New York Times who called on a Monday saying, "How can you be so insensitive as to feature any footage from that tragedy in a trailer?" And it happened that the Sunday preceding that phone call, the entire front page of the New York Times had been the first published photograph of all the people standing above the impact zone, all of whom we know passed away, some of whom jumped out of. And I said to the reporter, I know the answer to this, but isn't it fascinating that us releasing a trailer is creating this level of discussion, and you guys publishing a far more personal image in a newspaper isn't? Movies are, it's part of the beauty of this business. Movies are treated differently. But I think that the question of to what extent movies are contributing to violence is an incredibly complicated one, probably not best had in 5 minutes in this room. But we're all aware of the sensitivity that's required because films exist in their own space.
Let me ask about the major studios here. I get the feeling this year, even more than in past years, you're very energized about the Oscar race, that you think this is going to be a good year. Each one of you has a main horse and maybe some others. I mean, Jim, you have Life of Pi for sure, and you have all the Fox Searchlight films as well. Rob, you mentioned Flight, which is definitely, I think, right up the Academy's alley. I mean, I think we could see stuff there. Jeff, you have a lot, obviously Argo. Amy, you have Zero Dark 30 coming up, and other films, and you have Les Mis, which is the one everybody's afraid to see because it might be really, really good and affect the race that way. And Rob, you have an amazing movie called The Impossible, which is Juan Antonio Bayon's film. Stacey, you obviously have Lincoln. So are you guys, I joked about the beginning about Harvey, you know, going for a three-peat thing in there, but are you guys going to put a big campaign behind all of these and more energized than in the past?
First, we're collectively kidnapping Harvey. Yeah, no, I think it's an exciting time for all of us, and it's great to be, have movies that are being considered, and it's great that it's coming out of the studio system.
Yeah, I think the big change with studios, and certainly at our place and the folks that I've been in business with while at Paramount, is the cultures have really had to change at the studios because of the changing economics. So I think filmmakers are getting more comfortable of you can have that same level of independence and support from a major studio, but with then the support mechanism that the studio has to offer that didn't really feel like where you would be 5 years ago in terms of the freedom people would give you. And that with a lot of these changing dynamics, that folks are bringing and willing to do much more interesting material than maybe in the past 5 years they were looking to set up an independent. And I think that's why you do see such an interesting variety of movies from the majors this year, is how some of those have changed.
Amy's shaking her head.
I was just going to, I don't think I'm on.
Yeah, you're
Am I on? Okay. Wow. Okay. I was just going to say that I think it's incredibly exciting for all of us and incredibly exciting for all of you who are Academy members. And it is our responsibility to promote films that are historically and culturally relevant, and to make sure that we're telling people what is going to stand the test of time. And I think that what's great about all the movies, and I haven't seen all of them, but I think all of them sound pretty good, is that they're all movies that are about something, movies that are trying to say something, and movies that are trying to make us understand the world that we live in. And I think what's great about the Academy and great about the opportunity that we have this year is everybody's made these incredibly commercial movies that are also the kind of movies that we all got in the business to make. And I think that's pretty unusual.
I think we also have the luxury of having a lot of film that we can work on an annual basis, and many of them come to the surface as high quality and entertainment, so that it gives us the benefit of being able to have multiple films that we can push for this this process at the end of the year. We have the perks of being a wallflower, which was another great film that we have. So, we're excited about a lot of the lineup that we have as all of us here on this platform are. So.
I think what we all want also is for the films just to be seen. As much as possible, if we can ensure that our films get seen on a big screen and enjoyed the way they were intended to be enjoyed, not that we won't be sending out the screeners, and it's a big convenience, but when we amongst ourselves talk about how to campaign, it really comes down to making sure people see the movies and see them in the way they were meant to be seen.
I also think it's great news that the intersection of quality and commerce has never been greater than it is now. I mean, not to say there aren't movies that either critics don't enjoy or that we fool audiences into seeing, but by and large, the movies that are every so often. But by and large, the movies. Do you do that? By and large, the movies that are really popping are successfully satisfying both, more now than ever, because so much is known about virtually every movie we all make. The industry of talking about what scripts we're looking at, what movies we're greenlighting, who we're thinking of casting, people we aren't even thinking of casting, who tell you that we're thinking of casting them. The process is so transparent, and people can communicate with each other so quickly about the product they're seeing that even the most commercial product, I mean, a movie like Bridesmaids last year, and people haven't seen This Is 40 yet, but I mean, any movie in any genre, as has been discussed, it needs to be good and it needs to be satisfying to be commercially successful. And then the knock-on effect of having it talked about in the award season is great. But I think it's in all of our interest and the interest of the business to be making great film.
But why are we waiting till the last 3 months to see these films?
We're not. I think that's.
It's a fallacy?
I think it's a largely a self-created fallacy. I mean, we've all had films.
Hurt Locker came
Hurt
out
Locker
in
was June. Aaron Brockovich was March. Seabiscuit was summer.
Help last year.
Help was summer.
It was August.
Gladiator. Yeah, I mean, there's a.
So there's your answer. We're seeing it all year long. Well, maybe not this year. We didn't.
I think it's a well-guarded secret that our jobs are dependent on whether or not we actually make money for the studio. So what for us, the real key is obviously to balance commerce and to balance art. So as you look at these bigger films, someone just mentioned Gladiator in May, or if you go back to Ben-Hur or something like that, those are commercial, successful, big studio films. And, we make both, all of us. We make both. We make Argo-sized films, we make flight-sized films, and we make big, big movies. And there's no reason that the big movies...
Can't be good.
Yeah, can't be, quality. You always try and make a quality film. Obviously, as my dentist will tell you, we don't always do it. But the goal is to try and make great movies.
Jim, you were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking that, just apropos of what everybody said, we think of awards as celebrating and recognizing, acknowledging the work of great filmmakers, but it also does provide those of us that have to make these decisions. When they are those tough decisions, the hope of an award is much more than anyone's ego, although obviously that always plays into it on one level or another. But it is the hope that by recognizing a film in an award season and a post-award season, that it'll take it commercially beyond what it might otherwise do. And that might give you that extra bit of courage to say, okay, let's do it. And I think for that purpose, it serves all of us, and it serves our industry and especially the audience, to see movies get made that are, to some degree, the impetus is that potential.
And I should add, too, that we have on this panel 2 members of the Academy's Board of Governors, and that's Jim and also Rob Friedman there. And they have made some significant changes this year to try to get people to see these based on their awards' success. One is that now there's a longer period of time after the nominations come out, which are now going to be on January 10th, all the way to February 24th, 6 weeks instead of 4, which enables the audience out there, as well as Academy members, to catch up with these movies and have a rooting interest in the Academy Awards. Is that your... Well,
that was the purpose of it, and that combined with the fact that with electronic voting, we gained 4 to 7 days of snail mail that, was just a unnecessary part of the process. So, people are able to get their nominations in earlier. And, I've heard these excuses about, well, but that's vacation period. I'm in Hawaii and this. I think when we look at the work that we do, the jobs that we have and the jobs that most people on the planet have, when it's our job to see great movies and take the time to see them in time to at least nominate those that we think are worthy of being considered, that's not such a bad job, and it's not that difficult. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to the filmmakers and whatever organization we're voting for to make that time, and then to be able to really evaluate the pictures considered worthy nominated, to have that period to see them, as Stacey said and others have said up here, see it on the big screen. You can't see Life of Pi on an iPhone. It's just, it makes It's just, I mean, you could theoretically, but it'd be stupid. I mean, you'd miss the whole film, and any of these films.
I think the longer period of time is also great for the audience, so that it doesn't feel like it's a party just for the industry. And it's great to enable more Academy members to have time to see the films as they're meant to be and consider their votes. But it's also great to know that people around the country and around the world have more time to see the films that might be in more limited release and then rolling out more slowly, so they can participate in the suspense and fun of the evening and the telecast.
The Academy the Academy is not a monolith. They don't vote for specific movies in a group. You know, it's all made up of individuals that are, creators in their own right and vote for their categories in addition to Best Picture. So whatever we can do to allow them to have the time to view the films in their natural state wherever possible, and to think about the process and to execute on the process is what we try to do. So.
But Adam, I'm just wondering about Les Miserables. You actually moved it from December 14th to December 25th. That same day, the Academy announced they were having a shorter period for the nominations and voting starting December 17th and going to January 3rd. So this opens nationally right in the middle of all that. Did that give you pause about going to that date, or do you think that's affected at all?
We don't seem to be having trouble getting people to pay attention to it, and the reality is we're going to screen this movie like nobody's business the minute it's ready, and would have regardless. Its delivery date was not impacted. That was a commercial decision based on when we thought was the perfect moment to release the film, but we're starting to screen the movie the day after Thanksgiving, and are going to be screening it pretty much nonstop from there till time of release. So between the screening program, its commercial availability beginning on Christmas Day, and then for those who absolutely can't get out, the screeners, we think will have abundant opportunity. I think for some of the smaller films, I think the challenge will be for those films that may have been 10th, 11th, 12th, 20th, depending on how rabid a viewer you are. Finding some of the smaller films in the period would be more complicated. But for any of the films that we're talking about here that are on everybody's list, I don't think it's going to create a challenge.
And it doesn't matter to put the screeners out before the film's actually been released. Do any of you have a policy that you don't send screeners out until that time, or does that matter?
We sent our screeners out. As a matter of fact, most of you got them today or yesterday. So, no, we think it's important, again, because of the crunch of time, to have it there available. Obviously, we're screening the movies multiple times in theaters all across the country and across the world to try to get people into the theaters. But no, we have screeners in movies that won't be out until December. So.
I'd like to ask a two-parter of Jim G., who I promised I'd throw him a little chin music here. So, Jim, you make this movie Life of Pi, and it really is, when you see it in 3D, it's like Avatar in a lifeboat. And then you send out these screeners, and you know that you might have some voters who are evaluating it while they watch it on an iPhone. One, how much does that bother you? And two, should Oscar voters be required to actually see these on a big screen if they're actually going to cast a vote?
Well, that would be ideal, but I think it's logistic. Given the number of films involved, it is logistically very difficult. And yeah, it breaks my heart to put out a screener, but it is part. That's where I was saying before about process and purpose, and sometimes process has to yield to purpose. The alternative is to not even. Life of Pi, we debuted in New York at the end of September and have been screening it everywhere since. And it's been very well received. But at least you want people to have some access to it if they can't get to a screening, or even if they choose not to. And is it ideal? Of course not. But it is worth it to have that work acknowledged. And then you hope that once they've seen what they can see, even on a screener, which is, again, not preferred, that they'll return and see the film in its proper place and manner.
Well, all of you make large canvas movies that it's hard to really get a sense of what you're seeing. If I saw Lincoln on an iPad, it just wouldn't be the same as if I saw it on the big screen. Should voters, it's a privilege to vote for the Oscars. Shouldn't they have to show up to, at least for the nominated films, if they want to cast a ballot deciding the best picture of the year?
You can't.
I think you should talk to our voters and have them change the voting.
first of all, you can't require people to do that. Their membership does not stipulate that. Second of all, people are working all around the world, so and you wouldn't be surprised. Academy members actually do want to see the movies on the big screen. They do everything in their power to see them on the big screen. They're screening constantly at the Academy facilities around the world. So whenever the studios make the films available, they're immediately available to the Academy membership, and those screenings are generally full. So by and large, they do try to see them on the big screen.
I think to Jim's point, it's obviously the best version is to see it on a big screen because that's what we're making it for. But it's better to see the movie than to not see the movie at all. So for us, I think it's a second-tier choice, but we'd much rather have them see the films.
There's also an egalitarian reason for it. I mean, it would be in some ways ideal, but the purpose of banning screeners a few years ago was a very noble one. It was just that. And yet many people and many filmmakers and companies felt disadvantaged because they didn't have the resources to screen on the same level as others and therefore didn't have the same access to voters. So that creates other difficulties because it disenfranchises films that, but for the lack of multiple screenings or the date of opening, wouldn't be seen. So there are issues to it, and while ideal, I don't know if we could ever get there.
But hopefully Academy voters understand. They have enough information about what's intended. I know for me last year, I wouldn't even watch The Artist at home on a big screen because I knew that if I watched a silent movie by myself, I wasn't going to have the benefit. I probably would have struggled. But when you see it, at the Second Street Theater with a whole group of people, it comes to life. Pi will come to life in 3D. For Lincoln, we just watched a clip here that had 2 or 3 big belly laughs. It's hard to imagine a period procedural that appears at first glance to be somber, having so much entertainment value, unless you're enjoying it with a big audience. So hopefully we can convey that to Academy members, and they'll not want to miss out on the experiences.
Should we use the Academy Awards for other purposes too? I'm just curious, you have such a platform there. There's 24 categories, best live action short, a lot of things people aren't invested in. Is there an idea that maybe you could have a section of the show devoted to some upcoming blockbuster type movies that, aren't nominated or maybe coming out the next year, that you could use that platform for the industry and to energize moviegoers?
That'll be this year's 5-hour version of the show.
No, I think that little guy that should be a sacred thing that we take really seriously. I don't think it should be exploited for anything more than the greatest achievement of what our business does, and I think we should hold that dear. I don't think that we should sell anything with it. I think it should represent the best thing that all of us do. So no, I do not. I think that it should honor films like Batman and James Bond and all kinds of movies. I got that in there. Everybody else figured out how to get their movies in there.
But she's not campaigning.
I was listening to how Stacey did that, and I just slipped it in.
Well, now, so Amy, just to retort
But I
to that,
really came here to talk about.
how does
I do.
How does Seth MacFarlane, who's now a movie star based on a film about a cussing bear and a bawdy R-rated comedy, how does he fit into that sort of pristine?
Well, I came here to talk about Zero Dark 30.
Okay, so my question on that one,
But it is on that point.
Yeah.
The fact is, you do have to have a balance relative to the show, that it needs to be entertaining and it needs to honor the best movies, and that's the balance you're looking for. But as Amy said, you're not looking then to go to the extreme of saying this is no longer about honoring the greatest filmmaking. And I think that's the key about what the award show is and what we're all here talking about is great filmmakers telling great stories. That's what gets us all excited about the jobs we do. To then deliver that in an entertaining, fun way, that's the balance that you're hoping you find with the show that gets the most people to watch, but then honoring the greatest filmmaking.
I think that's exactly what Seth did. That's about as good a filmmaking as you're going to get. You make a cussing teddy bear do that kind of business? That's fantastic.
I do think you can broaden the scope of the types of films that are included and analyzed by the Academy, for sure.
Well, let's say I live on the East Coast, and sometimes I feel like I should win an award if I stay awake until the end of the Oscars. So now, but Jeff, given what you just said, what changes can be made? Maybe there could be best comedy, best ensemble, or again, is that treading on hallowed ground?
No, actually, I think those are two legitimate categories. I really do, particularly if you look at a film, we'll plug Argo. So Argo, right? There's 170 plus speaking parts, number of different characters in the movie. It really is an ensemble film. And it does feel like if you're going to nominate the film, you have to recognize that portion of it. So for me, absolutely.
Okay, look at everybody else on the panel here and tell me which film one of you made that you would like to have made yourself and are sorry you didn't. Anybody have anything,
Besides Avatar.
Besides, yeah.
Mine's easy, Skyfall. It's a perfect weekend.
Is there, though, when you're making these films, and there's regrets that you have or things, and you wish, God, I could have had the Best Picture Oscar had I just done that, or do you care? Does it matter in the end?
It's hard also to know what would have happened. That ultimately, it's a debate you always have about movies that you ultimately didn't make. Is that the same movie you would have made? Because ultimately, it is an intimate process when you're in these movies with a filmmaker. So the movie that Bob Zemeckis made, working with Brad Gray and Adam Goodman in Paramount, isn't necessarily the movie he would have made for someone else. So at some point, you just have to accept these are the movies that inspired you. It was a great script. It was a great team. And therefore, you made the best movie from it. And it's hard to then decide what we would have done if we had made Argo versus how great a movie Bob Zemeckis made working with us on Flight. That's all you can then really focus on.
I'm going to speak for all of us who make mistakes for a living. It is what we do. We make lots of mistakes, lots of things we don't do. Other people go on to do very well. But we have to make lots of decisions all the time. And I think the best thing to do is focus on the things that we did do, be them the right things or the wrong things. Because if we spent too much time doing what you asked us to do, we would be in bed with the covers over our head, and never speak again.
Well, Amy, you wanted a question on Zero Dark 30. How surprised were you to find that movie became sort of a political hot button over the idea that the filmmakers got cooperation, from the Obama administration that delved into classified material? And do you think, because let's face it, this Oscar stuff gets into, these campaigns are pretty aggressive and rugged. Do you fear that might be an issue?
Mark is a journalist, and he's an excellent journalist. And one of the things that Mark and Catherine do and set out to do is to make living history. They don't wait for people, they don't wait for books or articles or anything else to tell us how to feel about an event. They don't wait for time or interpretation. What they're doing with this movie is delving into something that is happening, that is in our heart right now today, and making us a part of it. And it's not as much of a political film as it is an emotional film, and a film about the greatest manhunt in the world, and a film about unsung heroes. I think it will surprise everybody when you see it, to see that it is about the decent people in our country who no one ever knows, who protect us every day, who give their lives for absolutely no money, no recognition, who are the true superheroes of our time, and they never get anything. They don't even get to wear those cool outfits and backpacks and shoot a lot of people, So I think that they make movies about something that no one else is making movies about, and I'm not one bit worried.
Okay, well, now, Stacey, you've been kind of quiet here, so I'm going to ask you this. Harvey's not here to answer the question. You know, Joaquin Phoenix was wonderful in The Master, but he certainly didn't help his chances by basically disparaging the award season process, basically calling it total, utter bullshit. If that was your movie, if he was your actor, what would you say to him? Because let's face it, this is, you know, it's not just on the merits. You got to get out there. When Meryl Streep got out there, she won the Oscar. When she didn't get out there for Julie and Julia, she didn't win the Oscar. So what would you say, and how do you, give me a sense of the care and feeding of these stars on the award circuit.
Oh gosh, the care and feeding of movie stars in general. I don't know if we have enough time. I think everyone here on the panel, and certainly I can speak for the DreamWorks team, we're true believers. You know, we really do think that movies can change the conversation. And so when we're presenting movies that rise to that, we're expecting that everybody feels the same way that we do. And at least I can speak for the people who were involved. With Lincoln, it was this kind of sacred endeavor, and it wasn't discussed. No one was that pretentious to say it. You just felt it, that everybody was bringing their very best game. And so for us, I think it's implicit and intuitive to find a way to present the performances, present our movie without being gross about it, you know, without feeling that we're pandering. So certainly if someone was disparaging of the Academy, it wouldn't comport with who we are. But by the same token, our goal is really to just present the movie and be appropriate about it.
How about some of you other guys?
I would just say, I don't know to what extent this is true for everybody else here, but I can tell you we're rarely surprised by what happens. You generally know who you're getting in business with, and that's not at all to disparage Joaquin, and he's brilliant, but most of the time, the people you decide to work with, you have some understanding of how they're likely to handle the process, and those are parts of the decisions you make. There are times when it's not the case, but I have to tell you, you know the people who enjoy getting out there and who want to do it and whose schedules are being protected to make that possible. You know the people who don't like to do it. So there may well be many surprises others here have. I have found we have had very few.
Would you make that a factor? And let's say if you had two great actors,
yes,
and you knew that one of them would go on the stump or be receptive to it, would you give that role? Would you give that in that Oscar movie? Would you give that role to that guy over the person who's going to basically disparage the whole thing?
No. You got to go for the best movie, the best performance, best combination.
I think disparagement and availability are two different things, you know. And Anthony Hopkins is Alfred Hitchcock in this movie, and he's making two films at the same time in London, and says, I've committed myself to these filmmakers, and I made that movie, and I'm proud of that movie, but I can't leave now.
And
that happens, and that happens to all of us. And that's not about dissing the process, that's respecting the work that they're doing at that moment in time.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Anthony is actually working, one of those is mine, and...
I was going to ask about a day off.
Coincidence?
Sorry about
like
that.
A week, just a week.
Actually.
3 days. I mean, wouldn't you want to see, you know?
But you know, I know we all experience the same thing, and it is a juggling match for not just the actors in the films that are up, but the directors and the writers and the other creative talent that are involved in not only in the process of making those films, but then in the process of trying to get the recognition for those films. So, by and large, I would say 99% of the time, everybody wants to jump in and be supportive. Schedules being what they are, and people needing to work, and all of that stuff. By and large, they're all supportive of the process, I think.
Well, I will leave you two to negotiate Anthony Hopkins' free time, and thank everybody on the panel for coming out. It was so great, so insightful. Thank you so much.